like to introduce the acting special agent in charge for the Denver Field Division, David Oleski. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is David Oleski, and I'm the acting special agent in charge with the Drug Enforcement Administration here in Denver. I would like to welcome all of you here this afternoon to our division office, and I specifically want to welcome and introduce the individuals and agencies who are joining me here today. First, Executive Director Keith Weiss of the Rocky Mountain HIDA, District Attorney John Kellner for the 18th Judicial District, Homeland Security Investigations, Acting Assistant Special Agent in Charge, Robert Nieves. From the Arapahoe County Sheriff's Office, we have Sheriff Tyler Brown. From the Douglas County Sheriff's Office, Chief Deputy Kevin Duffy and Captain Darren Weekly. From the Denver Police Department, we have Commander Paul Jimenez. And lastly, I'd like to welcome from the Arvada Police Department, Commander Anthony Barros. Today, we are here to highlight and discuss a multi-agency investigation involving federal, state, and local partners, which took place here in the Denver metro area over the course of the past 8 months and concluded over the last couple of weeks. This investigation is a model example for interagency partnership, utilizing a full array of investigative techniques and a focus on community impact. This investigation is also an example for the many unfortunate trends which we are seeing in the region, namely the flooding of our communities with both methamphetamine and the even more deadly counterfeit prescription pills laced with fentanyl. This investigation also too often confirmed the strong correlation that exists between the trafficking of illegal drugs and violent crime. This investigation was initiated in April of 2021 and targeted a poly-drug trafficking organization based in Colorado, led by Saul Ramon Rivera Beltran. As a result of an assortment of investigative techniques, investigators linked this drug trafficking organization to one of the most violent and powerful drug trafficking organizations based in Mexico, the Sinaloa Cartel. Investigators uncovered its distribution network in the region, which touched a wider range of cities and counties in the area, to include Commerce City, Aurora, Denver, Thornton, Arvada, and Lakewood. In addition, a number of significant events took place in both Douglas and Arapahoe counties. This organization was responsible for trafficking methamphetamine, cocaine, heroin, and counterfeit prescription pills laced with fentanyl. This investigation resulted in seizures totaling more than 110,000 counterfeit pills laced with the deadly fentanyl. Recently, DEA laboratory testing revealed that on average, 2 out of every 5 counterfeit pills laced with fentanyl contains a potential lethal dose, revealing that seizures made throughout this investigation prevented more than 40,000 lethal doses of fentanyl from reaching our communities. The defendants apprehended during this investigation were collectively responsible for coordinating the transportation of these drugs, as well as their packaging and distribution. Intelligence gathered throughout this investigation indicated that these pills can be manufactured in Mexico for as little as 4 cents per pill and sold wholesale here in the Denver area for as little as $3 or retail for between $10 to $20. This organization and its members had no regard for the impact their activities had on our community. It was all about greed and making money. In addition to the more than 100,000 fentanyl-laced pills seized, investigators also seized more than 6 kilograms of methamphetamine, 8 pounds of heroin, 11 kilograms of cocaine, and approximately $450,000 in U.S. currency from this organization over the course of the 8-month investigation. This investigation also reaffirmed the nexus between drug trafficking and violent crime, with 28 firearms seized, multiple hand grenades, high-capacity magazines, and several sets of body armor. This organization was preparing for a battle, one which played out on multiple occasions throughout the investigation. Also, the investigation revealed targets of the investigation would recklessly shoot their firearms out the windows of their vehicles in celebratory fashion, or would fire rounds in their backyards for fun. Whether you choose to focus on the pills, that this organization trafficked, or the combination of grenades and firearms which were seized, or the individuals whom were responsible for it all who were apprehended. The success of the operation was only made possible as a result of the strong partnerships we have with all of our law enforcement partners standing before you today. And on behalf of all of us from DEA, we are grateful for those partnerships. At this time, I would like to introduce Keith Weiss, who is the Executive Director for HIDA's Rocky Mountain region.
Thank you, Acting Sec. Oleski. As Mr. Oleski said, my name is Keith Wise. I'm the Executive Director for the Rocky Mountain HIDA High Intensity Drug Trafficking Area Program based here in Denver, Colorado. The Rocky Mountain HIDA is supported by the Office of National Drug Control Policy and has an overarching goal of bringing together law enforcement agencies at every level to reduce violence and the trafficking of the most dangerous narcotics that are impacting our communities. Today, Denver and several surrounding communities are much safer because of this unified law enforcement partnership dealing a blow to the worst of the worst criminal elements pushing deadly fentanyl. There is a national drug crisis in this country that has claimed more than 100,000 victims for the first time ever. Over the last year, there's been over a 30% increase in fatal overdoses across our country. We are not immune from this crisis. We've also experienced a 30% increase regionally, but unfortunately here in Colorado, the numbers are higher at a 46% increase in drug overdose deaths. The investigation being briefed here today is a stellar example of law enforcement actions protecting our communities from violence and rising numbers of overdoses. The leadership of this polydrug distribution organization has been disrupted and are associated with the dangerous weapons displayed here while conducting their illegal enterprise to push high-grade stimulants such as methamphetamine, cocaine, along with depressants such as heroin and the worst of the worst, which are synthetic pills laced with fentanyl. It is widely known that it just takes one fentanyl-laced pill to take a life. These narcotics are produced in clandestine laboratories with absolutely no quality controls or regulation, and are the primary cause of the elevated overdose incidents that sadly are resulting in more and more deaths. This effort alone, over 100,000 of these pills have been seized, never making it to the streets, and the people most responsible for its distribution indicted and arrested. By cutting off the stream of the availability of these extremely dangerous narcotics, invaluable time and space has been created for prevention and treatment specialists to continue their crucial roles of outreach to those individuals needing the resources. So without a doubt, our law enforcement professionals here today have saved lives of Coloradans. This complex criminal investigation required the resources and expertise from numerous agencies, both on the investigative and prosecutorial sides. It is these invaluable partnerships and shared goals of protecting our communities that are the recipe for success. On behalf of the Rocky Mountain HIDA, I want to commend the outstanding and noteworthy teamwork between the U.S. Drug Enforcement Administration, the Denver Police Department, the Douglas County Sheriff's Office, the Arapahoe County Sheriff's Office, the Arvada Police Department, Homeland Security Investigations, and the District Attorney's Office for the 18th Judicial District for the state of Colorado. It is now my pleasure to introduce District Attorney John Kellner.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is John Kellner. I'm the District Attorney for the 18th Judicial District, representing Arapahoe, Douglas, Elbert, and Lincoln counties. Now, the first thing I want to do is I want to recognize the outstanding efforts of our organized crime unit led by my Chief Deputy District Attorney, Darcy Kofel. She has built this unit into the go-to unit for these kinds of investigations throughout our state, and especially in the metro area. And if you look back at the news clippings, you will see this kind of work repeatedly come out of the 18th Judicial District DA's office. And that's because of the hard work of her and her team. Now, what do I hope you take away from this amazing indictment today of 19 people who are peddling poison in our community is that one pill alone can kill. And if you look at that over there and you see 110,000 pills in bags, about 40% of those, 40% are estimated to be lethal doses of fentanyl. So think about that. The work of this team has potentially thwarted over 40,000 deaths in our community. This is not a victimless crime. Drug distribution in our community has resulted in the seizure of some 24 plus firearms. This stuff right here, high capacity magazines, these weapons, these are the weapons that drug distributors are carrying around in our communities. This is not a victimless crime. Over 500 Coloradans died from fentanyl last year. We are on track to have over 700 fentanyl overdose deaths this year in Colorado. What we are doing with this indictment and with the work of this law enforcement team is to take the distributors off the street. But we cannot accomplish this goal alone, because the fact of the matter is this poison is coming over from our southern border unchecked. It will not stop coming over the border from Mexico into our communities until the federal government takes that porous border seriously. We need to put an end to the throughput that is coming in here and killing our friends and family. Thank you for being here today. I'm happy to take any questions.
What policies would you like to see changed at the border to stop this?
I'm going to start with what I'd like to see changed in the state of Colorado. Colorado's drug laws, especially when it comes to fentanyl, are behind the times. Right now, it's 4 grams of fentanyl is a drug misdemeanor level 1 to have that in your possession. Now, what does it take to kill somebody? 2 milligrams. Think about that NutraSweet packet that you put in your coffee every morning. Just 2 little grains of that can kill somebody. So what we allow people to carry around as a misdemeanor is actually enough to kill over 1,000 people. And that allows drug distributors to potentially walk around with too much of this and then face almost no consequences. That's number one. The other thing that Colorado needs to do is we need to have a sentence enhancer, much like the federal government has, for drug distribution causing death. And what that would do is it would raise the penalty for the people that peddle this poison, so that when they do this and somebody dies, they are going to prison for a long time, because the message needs to be sent that we will not tolerate this in Colorado. Other questions? Or for these gentlemen?
They're being indicted in the 18th, but should we expect federal charges as well, or?
I can't speak for federal charges. This case was brought to my office, and so it was charged through our grand jury. So we have a state level case going on. Typically, there's not a federal case going on at the same time. So we've got 19 different individuals. The leader of this group is being held on a $1 million bond. There are several people on $750,000 or $500,000 bonds, and we're going to bring them to justice and face accountability in our state courts.
Were they hiding in plain sight? And where were these people? Did they all live in the same place? Can you tell us more about the operation?
Sure. So I would encourage anybody to go get a copy of the indictment. It's lengthy and answers a lot of the specific questions as well about the ins and outs in the investigation. But by and large, these are distributed networks. I mean, they do not just reside in one home and operate out of that. As you heard these gentlemen mention, this organization trafficked throughout the entire metro area. So it's not just our community in Arapahoe and Douglas County or the 18th Judicial District. It's around Denver. It's in Thornton. Obviously, it's in Aurora as well, so it's been all over the place.
But are we talking a residential home? And what did it look like? What did their operation look like?
So it definitely varied. Some people live in a residential home, other people will live in an apartment, but they don't typically distribute it out of their place where they live. Now, when these folks talk about engaging every aspect of our law enforcement capabilities, they're talking about surveillance methods, they're talking about wiretaps, and using those means to basically figure out how the organization works and then to have a coordinated takedown. Do you gentlemen want to elaborate on that or how the operation works?
What I'll say first to your question is that when we're talking overdose deaths and we talk about the number over 100,000, there's no part of our nation that's immune from it. There's no part of Colorado that's immune from it. And I think when we start talking about this story of overdose deaths, people think that it's in some far-off place. Or if we're talking about the violence, if we're talking about these firearms and the trafficking of these narcotics, people think it's somewhere else in the country. And I think this investigation has showed, unfortunately, the window that we see through in law enforcement. We're sharing that with all of you today to make sure that everyone is aware of what our community is facing. And as you might have phrased, hiding in plain sight, that's the job of us in law enforcement, to identify these individuals, locate them, gather the evidence, and then work with our partners to put them behind bars. So I think that unfortunately I listed earlier today the handful of cities, and it was a breath of scope just in terms of the whole region and counties that this touched. And I just think it was amazing work by our investigative team to put this, and our prosecution team to put this together.
How did y'all connect these pills to the Sinaloa cartel? How do you know they're from Mexico?
Well, in terms of the connection, I think that's a more lengthy process of being able to explain on how. But what I will say in terms of the pills and Cs, and you can see in the photos that we have here today, about a decade ago, if you found these blue M30 oxycodone pills on the street, one could be led to believe that they were diverted from a legitimate pharmacy. That is not the case. Over the last decade, DEA, we've tightened and helped, created tactical diversion teams. We've increased, our oversight of the process by which legitimate oxycodone pills were being diverted in the past. What you're finding now on the streets in our communities are 100% manufactured south of our border. And when somebody acquires one of these pills, they should not trust that this pill is what it pretends to be, an oxycodone pill. And what I would tell the communities, anyone listening and watching, is that unless you get your medications from a licensed medical, doctor or pharmacy, I can tell you that these pills that you're finding, whether they're trafficked on the streets or on the internet, that they are going to be a pill manufactured south of our border. And, in years past, it might have been the case that if you were trying to acquire these pills, that you might have to go to a dark alley or a dangerous part of town. But also what we're seeing, just generally speaking, not per se in this particular case, but that these counterfeit pills are being trafficked on social media websites, TikTok, Snapchat. And so what I'd like to say is that, for parents listening, families listening, is that you should have this message with your loved one, with your kids. At the age that they can start going online and messing around on these social media applications, that's when the conversation in terms of the dangers of these drugs should be had. Because as was mentioned, these types of drugs are not one to experiment with, because one pill can just kill. And unfortunately, we've seen too many times over the last year and for many years now, this is not unique to any economic class, race, any part of society. We're seeing kids in grammar schools, high schools dying this, all the way up to, folks in their 60s, 70s who are seeking out these pain medications and dying as a result.
Now, the big question here is, how is all of this getting through the border? Do you have any information that you could share with us?
What I would say is that the Mexican cartels for years, right, they will take advantage of any vulnerability that we have in our border. And so what I would say, some of the methods that they've been used in the past continue to be used nowadays. And I think use your ingenuity, your mind, and probably double it. Because as I outlined earlier, just in terms of the profit that these cartels can make as a result of these pills. As I said earlier, you're talking about one pill can be manufactured in Mexico for 4 cents and sold on the streets here for upwards of $20. Or as I also like to say, if you picture 1 kilogram of cocaine, which is the size of your high school textbook, that 1 kilogram can generate 500,000 pills. And so if you're talking about from a business model for the Mexican cartels, they're going to take advantage of every possible vulnerability that might exist to get those drugs into our communities.
Another question for you. I don't know if I look too close to the pictures here. Would I see Social Security cards, a couple of them, at least 6 IDs. Are these people using fake documents as well to get through, or that's not related?
I don't have any particulars on the nature of the identification cards in the photos, so I don't have any further on that.
Thank you.
Yeah, given, 110,000 pills is a lot of pills, but given this crisis has gotten worse and worse with fentanyl for the last 2, 3, 4 years now, is that a major score? Is that take a big percentage out of Colorado, or are we talking a simple drop in a bucket for how many pills of fentanyl, waste pills we're talking about here in our state?
Thing like that. What I would say is, a year ago, a large seizure might have been 5,000 pills, 10,000 pills. And so these are significant seizures, as we talked earlier, where the potential for 40,000 lethal doses taken out from, prevented from reaching our communities. At the same time, what I can tell you is that last year, or fiscal year 21 for DEA, we seized 9.5 million pills. That is the equivalent of both fiscal year 19 and fiscal year 20 combined. So the rate at which these pills are flooding our communities, and what's also different about fentanyl as opposed to heroin, cocaine, is it's a synthetic drug. And so it's cheaper to manufacture. You don't need like agricultural-based drugs, lighting hectares and acres. These are pills manufactured in a garage or warehouse south of our border, and ultimately, as we've discussed, make its way up here. And so that's why we realize we can't arrest ourselves out of this thing, and we have to spread the word as best we can.
Have y'all been able to connect these 19 folks to any overdose deaths?
No. To my knowledge, no.
Yeah, that's yet to be determined, I think, at this point. Certainly, if in the future, that would be something that we would talk about after, case and stuff like that, so.
Were any of the guns, how about the guns? Were they stolen? Were they bought legally? What's the firepower here?
How many are stolen?
I believe, do we know how many were stolen?
Yeah, so I believe over the course of the investigation, the agents determined that of the 28 guns that were seized, six were stolen, and several others were used in connection with other crimes in various locations.
What kind of crimes?
I couldn't tell you that offhand, sorry. I can follow up with you though, Elise.
And all this wasn't from one residence, right? This is from several. Yeah. Do you expect more arrests out of this? It seems like you kind of found this group and have other connections. Do you expect to find more folks connected to all this?
I would say like any kind of complex investigation where you have the sort of initial takedown after a lengthy investigation, the more you delve into it, oftentimes there's connections to other groups or other individuals. So we remain open to that possibility, and whether or not there will be additional charges remains to be seen. Not all 19 have been taken into custody at this point, so there are still some folks from the original 19 that were indicted by the grand jury that remain at large, and we're looking for them.
You may have mentioned this already, but as far as overall street value of everything, not just the 2.2 million in pills, fentanyl, how much are we talking here with everything that's shown? I mean, ballpark.
I couldn't tell you. I mean, these different guns can go on the street for, wildly varying amounts of money, right? So it's really difficult to say, but it could be several $100s per firearm. And the thing that we oftentimes find with firearms that are seized in cases like this, not saying this one in particular, but as you heard mentioned, that some of these were connected to other shootings. So whenever there's a shooting that occurs, especially in a metro area where we're able to collect a shell casing, we try to put that into NIBIN, the National Integrated Ballistics Information Network, to connect one case to another case, and then we try to figure out how's that gun connected, who possessed it, and then solve the crimes that way. So would it surprise me that other firearms seized here had been used in other crimes? Absolutely not, and that's indicated already. Any other questions?
How is the local community gonna feel the result of this investigation, if any?
How's the local Hispanic community going to feel? I think it's not just limited to the local Hispanic community. When we talk about one pill can kill, again, what we have seen repeatedly is that, frankly, black and brown members of our community are oftentimes at more risk of overdose deaths, and the studies bear that out. And so when we talk about getting pills off the street and taking traffickers out of the equation to make sure that they can't peddle this poison to more people, that's all a good thing. So I hope the message is being sent to them is that the folks in this room that have worked on cases like this and will continue to work on it are doing it for their benefit to try and spare them or their kids from being exposed to this poison.
How many of the 19 are in custody?
So 11? 11,
And they're all in custody in Colorado?
yes. The indictment is venued out of Douglas County. As you can see, there's members of our team from Douglas County Sheriff's Office who participate in this operation as well. And so in order to get the indictment itself, I would direct you to the clerk of the court in Douglas County.
I also want to make sure, so did some of the firearms also come from Mexico or not necessarily, just pills?
Yeah, I can't answer that question. Not that I literally don't know the answer, so I couldn't tell you.
I can follow up.
I want to make sure, so.
I want to say offhand, I don't believe so,
Okay.
but I can follow up for you with the information.
Okay. One last thing, I don't know, and I don't know if my colleagues also want to ask the same thing. We've seen the wave and all the shootings recently involving young people. Is there a message that you guys want to push out to students, to family members, especially parents, to pay attention to what their kids are doing on social media? You mentioned, social media, it's really a big platform for these people to gain access to all of this. Is there a message you guys want to send out today?
The amount of violence that we're seeing from kids, from young people in our community, it's absolutely heartbreaking. And the message, as I saw again and again, these shootings in and around high schools, is that it doesn't have to be this way. It doesn't have to be this way. And we can't, like you said about the fentanyl, we can't arrest our way out of this problem. It takes a community level answer, and it takes parents being involved with their children and knowing what they're doing, where they're going, who they're getting in a car with. And anybody that's seen recently, my office has charged individuals as adults associated with these shootings. It wasn't too long ago that I prosecuted a case involving a young man who was 17 at the time who ended up shooting a police officer in Cherry Hills Village. That young man was sentenced to 44 years in prison, all right, for that act. Once somebody picks up a gun, a young person picks up a gun and starts shooting it, the time for the low-level interventions, the time for diversion, the time for probation, that's well past. So when they start picking up firearms like this and acting like adults, they're going to be treated like that under the law. It doesn't have to be that way, though.